up to you. Don't have to.
Are we good?
You're good.
We're good. Okay, hello, everyone. Happy August. In spite of what I thought was not going to be a Board of Finance meeting, and I got a dirty look from Mr. Schulte over there, but no, I appreciate you all being here. Thank you very much. It's an important meeting and discussion. It's right, isn't it amazing? You got the whole team here, and I think 1 or 2 people online. So, so this is a special meeting. We're not voting on any dollars or amounts tonight. We're here to really get that update we were looking for on the MOU, on P&Z, on your budget, and all that. And we wanted to make sure that we have all the information we need as we proceed to that next step, which will also be a special meeting likely where we'll call to do a vote on the $10 million. So that'll be the next thing that's on our agenda at a time to be determined after this meeting. So I'll call the meeting to order. And I will actually ask the first selectman to give just a brief update on some new news regarding the project. I just wanted to make sure everyone was aware of a suit that had been filed regarding P&Z in the library.
It's actually an appeal.
Okay.
So we received yesterday in the library, received as well, an appeal of the Planning and Zoning Commission's decision. And essentially, anyone within 100 feet has the right to appeal by right. And KK LLC at 16 South Avenue, which is the mobile station, is the other plaintiff in the appeal. So I talked to the town attorney this morning. This will take its course, but need not necessarily delay proceeding the project.
Okay, Justin.
Kevin, can I ask you a question? So did the Preservation Alliance need to have the owner be on board for them to file this appeal?
Well,
Is it because they don't have a location on the 100 feet, so I'm just wondering.
I don't want to comment on my conversation with the town attorney. I think better than a comment for
Okay.
others. Yeah.
All right.
Okay, with that, I think Lisa, turning it over to you.
Okay. Tucker, would you mind pulling up our?
Yes.
Thank you. So thank you. It's been about 18 months since you invited us to first share this with you. So I thought we would go through here we go. Go through just a bit of background, get everybody back up to speed on how we got to this point. And then Paul's going to speak about the guaranteed max price contract and elements of the building project. And then Bob will speak about our cash flow projections and all of the enormous spreadsheet you all got. And then, of course, questions along the way if you want, or we've left plenty of room at the end for questions.
Yeah, I think if you don't mind, we'll ask questions at each section,
Sure.
not wait till the end. That's okay. And if we have to defer one to another, to you, Paul, or to Bob, that's fine.
So yeah, if there's something that's about to come up in the next slide, we'll so say, but otherwise, yeah, I think that makes good sense.
Sure.
So next slide. Sorry.
I'm just going to take us through our financials. Once you lost control.
I'm gonna let people in, he's gonna drive that.
So as you all know, while there were a lot of fits and starts starting in the early 2000s, this version of the project got started in 2012 when the then library hired Centerbrook Architects to come and do some work, and 40 people from the community got together, and there were intensive focus groups and full-day workshops where Centerbrook heard from the community what were the things they wanted in a new library, what was important to them. And it was an iterative process throughout the entire autumn, which resulted in many different concept drawings. There were about 11 or so in total. That took them to about the end of that year of working collaboratively and iteratively. Then the next big thing that happened was 2014. The library conducted a feasibility study on fundraising to understand what could be raised from the community in the way of philanthropic funds to fund such a project. The next big landmark is 2017, and that was the purchase with the help of town of 48 South Ave, which gave us the full footprint of the block and allowed us to re-engage with Centerbrook and restart the project. That happened in January of 2017, and by April of that year, we had the first iteration of what has become the project that we've taken forward. We received it in April. Everyone involved with the library thought it was terrific, but the first thing we did was to share it with members of town government, people in the elected bodies, Planning and Zoning Commission of the time, and we socialized it really well through all these bodies to make sure that this was a project that people could get behind. The next step was to start fundraising. So the next slide, yep. So at the behest of leadership in town, we set to raising the first 50% of the expected cost of this project. The previous government had suggested that there might be some money from town for this project if we could raise all the money, and we got the message loud and clear that if we raised 50% of what we expected it to cost, that we could come back and speak to you about becoming an investor. So that's what we did. We set to during the year, calendar year 18 and 19. We met with over 1,000 people, over 200, almost 250 families invested a total of $17 million towards this project. And it was at about that time at the very end of 2019 that we got an invitation from this body to come forward and share the project, which we did. Right after that, we heard from town council. They made a deliberation and a decision that any monies that might come to this project wouldn't be conditioned on any design elements. We then came back to Board of Finance and you said, look, we think this is a great project. This is what we heard from you, but we're going to need a bunch of stuff. You're going to need a fully approved plan. You're going to need to show us how you're going to pay for it. You're going to, I can't remember the other things, but so we said, okay, in order to do those things, we need to get going. And in June of last year, with that advice, we signed a contract for $4 million with Centerbrook Architects to turn those concept plans into a fully developed plan that was something that could be taken to P&Z to get an approval. So we've been very focused on creating a facility that would meet the needs of this community for a modern library, one that could serve as a platform for learning for families and individuals to connect to information and culture, as well as to the rest of the community. A place that supports students and families and local businesses, entrepreneurs, our most senior citizens, through the spaces and programs and collections that reflect the interests and needs. And so this is where we've arrived today. We've got an approval from Planning and Zoning to move forward. We've got about 50% of the money raised, just under currently. We've got a plan for raising the rest of the money. We've got a facility with a local bank teed up and ready to sign up. And we're ready to move forward and hope to have construction starting as early as the 1st of September. Next slide. There we go. Paul?
So what you're seeing on the screen there is the GMP, hold on, here we go, which is a collapsed schedule of values. And the reason for this, and I think Neil and Chris are aware of the reason that we don't have as detailed a report as you would get once we've got a finalized GMP and we have full approval from the town, all the town bodies. The reason for that is right now it's been out to bid. And by combining these, you can't tell on any one of those line items, say for instance, site work or concrete. If we were to supply the full detail that will be provided as we move forward, those bids have not been finalized. So then this is a matter of public record. And so those bids, it would jeopardize those bids. So at this point, what you've got is a condensed version of that GMP. Ultimately, what this GMP is this is from the CM, the construction manager, and that's Turner Construction, who perhaps most of you are familiar with. What they've done with the GMP is they've set up each of the different cost components of a job in a format from the AIA, the Architects Institute of America, which is not this, it's a much more detailed report. And that will be forthcoming again, once we get a full approval from the town and a finalized GMP. But there's line items for each cost component, be it site work, concrete, steel, electrical, so forth and so on. Those are hard bids from subcontractors and the various suppliers that go into making up all the components of a building. There's a schedule value from those that are hard numbers that are contractually based with the CM, between the CM and the subcontractor. And as the job moves along, there are different draws for work completed. And you have the other sections that you can see the current draw. And then you see what's been billed to date. And then there's a balance to finish for each of the line items. And all of that is completely vetted by the team, including myself, the architect, and the entire team. That's how we control the costs. And so I believe you have gotten a cash flow projection, which includes revenues. I'm really speaking about just the hard cost. I'm speaking about the expense side right now. And the lion's share of it, of course, is the GMP, the hard costs from the CM. There are other costs as well, specifically the soft costs, much of which is the design element, the design team, the various engineers and the architects that Lisa had talked about. We had $4+ million contract with Centerbrook, the architect, that included his team of civil engineers, structural engineers, acoustical engineers. There's a whole slew of engineers that go into making that up. What I believe.
The next slide.
The next slide.
When
I'm not sure what the next slide
Bob,
is.
because Bob is
Okay.
going to speak to this. But you can see
Okay,
that.
so on the lower section there, you can see on the expense side, the cash flow projection. And you can see that the CM figure in there. So it's important to understand that the GMP, which right now is at $29,222,000, it includes nearly $1 million in construction contingency, which is what you would normally hold in a project like this. But I just thought I would point that out so that all the board members are aware of that. And we have projected out in time on ours that this will be forthcoming once we get our finalized GMP. But we were able to identify what the cash needs were with basic projections, and Bob will speak to this, but what the financing needs would be. So in the soft costs, as you'll see there, you'll see financing based on those projections. And there are a bunch of other costs as well, which include utilities, administration, insurance, and the legal costs, of course. Large part of that was to get the approvals. So that's sort of the general overview, but we have control measures in place, pre-construction, during construction, and then post-construction when it's time for closeout. And making sure the documentation of all the work that's been completed in the brand new, wonderful building that we'd be occupying, that we can use that, use all of that information for proper maintenance and life systems for the library and how we manage all of that. So the gist of,
That
let me see
one?
if there's,
And then I think Bob was gonna. I think Bob, there he is.
yeah. So Bob could speak to the revenue side of things.
So a question for you, Paul.
Yeah.
The total expenses on this cash flow, 38.5 million. We've been talking about 39.2 million. So can you explain to us the difference?
A lot of that has to do with the value engineering. I call it value engineering during the design process. So there was an early budget in the design phase of things. They're early design. You do early pricing. You have incomplete design, so you make certain assumptions, but you get budgets associated with that. You don't design the thing out completely to every bolt and screw and whatnot, and then go out to price because you don't want to be surprised by the cost. So you do it at different milestones along the way. And so the budget we were carrying earlier on, we were able to control it and to bring it in under those earlier projections. So it's important to note on that slide too, you can see that up there, there's a $1 million owner's contingency, and that's only to be used when necessary. So we think it's prudent. It's something you would typically do here. Very often projects will carry a lower number. We like to be a little bit more conservative. So
Right, so you have the $1 million owner's contingency, and you also have 989,000 CM.
that's a different, which is separate.
contingencies.
Yes.
So those are included in your 38.5.
Correct.
So is that the current cost of the project now?
That's your
Yes.
number?
Remembering that we haven't signed this GMP until after the approval next week.
So that's the project cost, which includes, if you go up there, 29,222,000.
Right.
And within that 29,222 is the almost $1 million in construction
And
contingency.
that squares with the GMP. So just to be clear, we've been hearing and talking about a $39.2 million project. You're now telling us that it's 38.5, 38.6.
It's still moving around, right? Because we haven't signed up yet. So, but yes, we're looking at, the costs have gone down is what you're asking, Chris. And the answer is yes.
So you just said the costs are moving around. So how are the costs?
So here's what happened. In the process, what will happen is if we get through tonight and next week, we get through this body and hopefully we'll get an approval, and moving forward to town council, we get an approval there. We're hopeful for that as well. After that, my understanding from our legal counsel is that we can sign up the CM and they can get, they have these subcontractors and suppliers waiting in the wings, just itching, ready, waiting to go, needing this final approval. Once we get that, we can do that, and those numbers go hard. Once we do that, we can get a very hard schedule as well. So this was actually, and this version here, I believe, well, one of the versions we've been working with was a July start, and that's obviously, that's come and gone. So we've been delayed 2 months, and we've included in this GMP an escalation for that delay, and it's 6 figures, and it's
So
that's included in there. But if we have yet further delays, that throws everything into question.
Okay, so the
Chris, can you
GMP
speak into the
contains.
mic? They're telling me they can't hear you. Yeah, thank
Yeah,
you.
okay, so the delay contingency is included in the GMP.
Well, I wouldn't call it a delay contingency. There's an allowance in the GMP to get us through from what was originally to start earlier, another 2 months, and to start early September. And that's what that includes. So it's not a contingency. So as Lisa mentioned, the numbers are, they're solid for now, but we have to act on it, I guess is the point. And if we move forward with that, then we can really solidify that, and it will come in very close to it. We have
Yeah, what I'm
delays.
getting to is whether or not it was already in your plans, at least some of the delay has been factored in.
Currently, yes, but for a September start.
So, very, thank you.
Excuse me, what's in the 989,000 separate contingency?
What's in that? That is a number. It's a bucket of money that CMs carry. And it's typical in this kind of project for those unknowns, right? We'd like to think that, we have great architect, the best architect in the world. There's always going to be in some project a bunch of unknowns. You have to plan for it. And that's really what that is.
Sorry, that's just a plug number. That's just their best guess.
It's
what makes
yeah,
sense.
it's a percentage on that,
And
and
just took it out, right?
Yeah.
It's just their best. sense.
yes, and based on their experience, they're obviously very experienced in that.
And is there a guaranteed outside date of completion?
We have at 24, there are a couple of phases in this, and you will get the moving forward, once we have that completed, we will have, along with the GMP comes the schedule of when that, and different milestones. So it's about 18 months for the building and another several months that there can be some overlap for the green in that area.
And what's the consequence of missing those dates?
The consequence of missing those dates is there are, the contract that we have, the draft contract we have right now is, there are liquidated damages, but it's minor. It's been a negotiated, and that can all become,
It's a per diem coming back. to
yeah,
the library.
yeah,
Right.
Yeah.
Sounds kind of the way these things typically are.
right.
And then I did notice that your, the term sheet, which I guess will morph into a deck at some point from the bank, but the term sheet now has a completion requirement of 24 months. But some of these drawdowns are saying this is over 3 years. I'm just wondering. how
Bob
this-
can probably
I
speak
think,
to
yeah, you
that.
can speak to
Bob's
that.
prepared to speak to this
Well, we can
next
speak
slide.
to that with Bob.
Yeah.
We don't
Right.
have to do that.
Oh, I have one question. Is there a representative from the bank now?
There is not.
No,
I have a question. So the last time you presented to us, you said that it would be about $600,000 to move the facade to go to the Gulf Station side to block it. And I was wondering if there is, do you have a sense for how much the total incremental cost is for all of the sort of obstructions that have happened from the preservation lines to the gas station? So like a sum that you have for that amount?
I
We-
certainly
we-
don't have
we don't,
something
it's,
to, I mean,
it's significant, but we
the-
don't have an actual number.
when we have the couple of $100,000 increase from the delay and start from what we had originally imagined, but to pin that on any one thing would be, that wouldn't be correct. No, we don't.
But it seems like it might be approaching $1 million, I would guess.
I wouldn't want to say, put a number on it. It would be just too difficult to make that. It's an unknown. So I wish I could answer.
Any-
Yeah, Did you, I'm trying to recall, it's been a lot. So did this construction budget timeframe is basically for the library campus as is, as you put forth. We're not at this point trying to figure out how to address some of the provisions for P and Z to memorialize library. None of that's in there. What about any changes or potential changes to change to the parking lot? Are any of those costs here?
They are not.
Okay, just what we're talking about is kind of the square of the kind of square. Okay, thank you.
You know, right now, question?
Quick one, is there a contingency if there's any excess left? It converts to.
It comes back to the library. Right.
I suspect we would, it means we're drawing down less from the bank.
Or less fundraising.
for less fundraising.
So I have two questions. One, Lisa, you said a couple of times that the number is not finalized yet, and we need to have an approval of the bodies before we can finalize the number. I'm not trying to follow that, but I guess the big question really is, where's your degree of confidence on 38.5? Because we can't approve anything and find out it's 42.6.
We're very
Very confident.
confident because we've had lots of professionals look at this in so many different ways. And we have contracts, subcontracts written up, ready to be signed. But to Lisa's point, they can't be signed until we get your approval and town council's final approval. We can sign them up. And then, like I say, these numbers go hard.
Okay. Second question I had is in the soft cost list of other things, there's also an other of 600,000. What is that?
That's a mix of things. Some of that is the consulting fees, including owner's rep, but then there are some other things, so you would get a breakdown of all the soft costs moving forward.
I guess I still have one other question. I can't believe that. The thing I printed a few days ago had cash, future pledges, and pending gifts of about 12.5 million.
Let's get Bob on here.
Yeah,
Okay, that was what that was said. And then you said we have $17 million of donations. So that's a big difference. A big, good difference.
So we've already got money,
so there's cash
We
on
have cash in
hand,
the bank. We've got
pledges.
spent money, and we got pledges.
Okay.
Right.
So adding it all up,
Some of it's spent. That's what it is.
yes, we've spent
Okay.
close to 5 million already.
One more question. because I was on the tax code and I'm just trying to remember, and the contingencies are really important to have in this. So it's all in about a 5% contingency between construction contingency and library.
Of the most recent, yeah, it's close to that. And that's typical.
Yeah, no, I think that was similar in Saks. We had the owner's rep, and a lot of these consultants make a big difference in bringing this on time and on.
You
budget.
have to, otherwise, you're adrift. And
Yeah.
you can't have that in something like this.
And then, I'm sure it's similar, and then the payment to the subs, and they always have that, I want to say the retainer, the whole back.
There's backup for the payment requisitions come in monthly,
Yeah.
right? And it's all in arrears. So, the concrete gets poured, the steel gets, so each monthly draw gets reviewed by not just me, but by the architect. And the architect signs off on it. And it goes through this whole process. And all that backup for everything that Turner gets billed comes into the requisition to the library. And that all gets vetted by a whole slew of people
Right.
before it's signed off.
Right, and typically, there'll be, what's that, I forget the word, like a percentage holdback.
Yeah, there's
Contract.
retainage. There's
Yeah.
typically
You hit certain
5%
milestones
retainages.
and
That's
you
right.
line it up, yeah.
Right. And it's a way to
Very
make
nice.
sure they come back to do it. But it's less of an issue. We have it on this job, but Turner's, their relationships with the major subs, they're not getting just fly by night people. It's people they know are vetted, used before. They're known and they're solid. They're a solid company. They wouldn't even put it out to bid with companies that aren't, right? And they get the best numbers from all of them. They use them routinely on different ones for that trade, different electricians or different concrete. They have a whole slew of them. And whoever comes in with the best numbers, and very often it's the one that's not as busy, right? Or whatever, maybe they're particularly suited to this project, but there's a whole process that goes behind it. So there are many levels of comfort that I have, and I think you all should have as well. Just having Turner on the team with that and their relationship with subcontractors.
For sure.
Yeah.
I have a follow-up to Victor's question. I'm not sure it got answered. There's a potential expense associated with the scope for preservation. None of that is really in your numbers. And that's
Correct.
So that's absolutely right.
Okay, I just want to, that's what I
There's
thought.
That's
nothing in
correct.
here that relates to the second project, which we will now be
The
on.
second aspect, I think that was your question. I think that was
I
your
think
question.
that's what.
And there's
yeah.
none of that. It could be $500,000, $1 million, $2 million for me. I don't know that number is certain, but that's not.
We haven't started
We haven't designed
designing
it.
the
We haven't
building, so
designed it
there's
yet.
no way of knowing.
Yeah, but that's due in December. Right, so the library has until December.
120 days from,
The publishing
July.
January, yeah, which is like middle, so it's like mid-December.
I anticipate we'll see something before then, but we do have 120 days.
If we come back to that, because I think this impacts the MOU and other governance and other related things, because we can't have a blank check for that. There has to be discussion about that. So
We're not asking you for any money for that.
I appreciate that. Someone's going to. So we just want to make sure we understand the process for how that's going to get managed. I don't think, other than your 120 days, you'll have to work that through again. Yeah, I think we totally get that.
Was that the import of Victor's question?
I thought it was.
Yeah, well, yeah, it was the import. So I was asking because I was wondering whether the town, we agreed to put in $10 million, but maybe we should put in some more because there is this group of people that are creating obstacles, creating the project is becoming more expensive, and they're taxpayers, they're doing this with impunity. So maybe if there's an impact on, what the town ponies up for that extra expense, will be, there will be an incentive to be more reasonable.
Well, I do want to keep that separate. I think we have to do something. I just don't know what we're sort of negotiating with our, we don't know what that would even look like yet, to your point. I don't think you've got that easy work done or anything else.
That's right.
Started, but it's important. We can't ignore it. We can't pretend it doesn't exist. It's real and it exists. Just don't think we know what it is at this point to work through. But I want to make sure, because I'm pretty sure that was a question you were asking. It's a very important question. Okay.
It's, the scope of that is in the hands of PNC, because libraries go back to PNC and get approval of those supplemental plans. So we have no way of knowing
Right.
what it's going to be.
That's what I just said. I think that's what I'm saying. That was kind of my feedback to the question. Now, in the details, I don't remember the exact amount. There was some site work and landscaping, and it was a lot of money. Was it $5 million? Was it that big? Was it substantial?
Well, if you mix the two, right, it's 5 million, 2, 3, but that includes site work, landscaping, and exterior work. And you bundle it again for the reasons I mentioned earlier,
We're
but
gonna bundle it to keep it confidential.
Exactly.
I got that. It's a big number.
so and here's what it includes. It includes site work would be all the excavation, the drainage, the landscape includes the hardscaping, meaning, the stone surfaces and all the plant materials and all that. And the exterior work, a lot of that would be, well, I would have to dig into these numbers. I don't have
Probably
the breakdown in
demolition
it,
as
but
well, right?
it's probably demolition and some of the parking
That's the
work that we have to do with, those, but those are numbers, right?
I
And that's
appreciate
in there.
that. Love that detail. Was it?
So when you look at, when you look at it grouped together, it is a large number, but when you look at the components, it all makes sense.
Okay, so the follow-up question was going to be, what are the annual costs for maintenance and keeping that $5 million investment, but it isn't really, because some of that stuff, there's no maintenance on demolition. Or there's no ongoing, work that needs.
Yeah, that's
There would be some of the-
That's not in these documents, something separate as part of the operations. This is really purely just the construction project.
Okay,
So that's not in there, but
so all that site work and landscape does include a lot of things that would require annual maintenance.
Well, the
Yeah.
landscaping does for sure, and we've got some preliminary idea of what our landscaping costs will be going forward. Of course, we already pay landscaping costs, right? So it's a change to an existing line item in our operating budget.
All right, that will be a helpful breakout, because that's a commitment we all have from an operating point.
and all that will come once we get forward and we're officially approved and we have a signed GMP.
And I have shared before a couple of times that 5-year projections based on what we know today, which you all have asked for and the town council has asked for, and I've submitted a few times and I update it each time. It obviously gets more and more refined every time. Once we get forward on this, we'll be able to start refining that a bit more. But landscape company can only give me an estimate based on drawings right now.
I understand. It's not $5 million of landscape.
That's right.
It's an incremental
Some number of
cost,
landscaping. A lot of it is things that are one-time events. for
Correct.
Construction.
For like excavation, you just do it once. It's
Okay, that's good.
With the operating estimate budgets that you prepared for us earlier, the landscaping costs there are based on landscapers' assessment of what it would cost to manage the new campus, not
Correct.
that's right.
So our existing landscape people who do the work today have seen the drawings and have made a good faith best case estimate of what they think. Obviously, we bid it, we bid out periodically every couple of years, we go to market. So we would, as we do with anything else, but we do have a ballpark figure on what the landscaping costs post-construction, once we're in and operating, would look like.
because it's a more complex landscape than you have now.
Well, it's all in one place as opposed to 3 sides of a parcel. Now you've got a building in the middle and you've got landscaping all around. So in some ways it's more complex. It's certainly,
Waiting.
Okay, other questions right now for Paul? Move on to
Bob.
Bob, we'll go through cash flows.
My turn?
Your turn.
So
Okay, well, good evening, everyone. This is Bob Butman, board chair of the library. I'm going to just start by giving a quick update on the financials, really for the capital campaign and the library itself. Since our last meeting in July, so not a heck of a lot has changed. And as most of you know, since we've been awaiting P&Z approval, the project's been on hold, but there have been some changes in both the revenues and expenses. So I'll run through that for you very quickly. I think for the most part though, and as Paul has alluded to, the costs have been tracking on target throughout the project, and with the most recent GMP coming down slightly, which is very, very encouraging. And, in terms of the project schedule, we are on schedule now that we have P&Z approval for a tentative construction start date the first week in September. So that's great news. Okay, so let's start with the estimated project costs. I think you heard earlier, 39.2 down to 38.6. That includes 1.7 million in contingencies. Based on the GMP, the hard costs are 29.2 million, and there's a $750,000 contingency in that number. So we're trying to be very conservative. The estimated soft costs are 8.2 million, and there's a $1 million owner's contingency, obviously, in that 8.2. So if we look at it, and with the estimated soft costs, what are they? And I think Paul, explained it. It's primarily the architecture fees, the design, the engineering. The FF&E is 2.4 million. Legal fees would be a large variable there, and the costs for consulting and otherwise. But that has pretty much, with the exception of legal, been on target. And legal is one thing that we really can't forecast as well as we'd like. As far as the capital campaign financials itself, the total capital campaign revenue is 17 million. And to go to Todd's earlier question, how is that 17 million made up? Okay, it's 6.4 million in cash on the balance sheet now. Our expenses for the fiscal year 21 that have already been paid are 3.76 million. Our pledges receivable are 3.2 million. Our conditional pledges based on shovel in the ground are 2.7 million. And there's some prior expenses prior to fiscal year 21 of basically 900,000. So all that adds up to exactly 17 million. And if you want clarification on that, in the spreadsheet that was sent to you, you'll see under capital campaign financials a tab that really links that number from our essentially our accounting system in QuickBooks to the audited numbers. So that 17 million number is a good number. And as I mentioned, the cash position now, and by the way, we've just finished our fiscal year end on June 30th, and we just got our financials. And they're unaudited, obviously, as of yet. But just to give you an update there, our cash position now is 6.36. So it's down slightly because we've obviously picked up quite a few expenses over the last month on primarily architecture and design. And then our future revenues, as we discussed, the 3.2 for confirmed pledges, excuse me. The conditional pledges of 2.7. And then our other revenue, obviously, is the 10 million from the town in terms of a grant. And based on that spreadsheet of the cash flows, you'll see that we estimate the first payment to be this fall at the end of September, based on getting a shovel in the ground at the beginning of September. And that first payment will come down. The original estimate a month ago was closer to 6 million. That's down to 4.2 million just because of the later start. Then we would anticipate another payment from the town on that grant of 1.7 million in December. And then the final payment would be 4.1 million in March of 2022. And that really reflects, that the costs of the project start to kick in dramatically over the first quarter of 2022 when Turner's going full tilt. Okay, our fundraising plan, the remaining revenues. How do we plan on generating the next 13 million to finish out the project? Well, it's a 4-year plan, and obviously it starts this year and ends in 2024, hopefully. And the timing of the pledges and the fundraising would be roughly 1 million between now and year end, $6 million in 2022, $5 million in 2023, and $1 million in 2024. Those pledges would be multi-year pledges. So the payments, the cash flows, if you will, would extend out to 2028. And the way we've modeled this is essentially as follows. You know, we're shooting to get 20% as outright gifts. Then the remaining 80% would be based on multi-year pledges, of which that 80% would be 3-year pledges and 20% would be 5-year pledges. So we're discouraging long-term pledges as best we can. So if we look at the timing, then we would finish recouping all the money in 2028. Then if we look at our expenses, again, year to date, those are 3.76 million that we've just spent here in the last fiscal year. So those are the latest numbers. And, you know, they're pretty much as we expected and is again on target. Now, the bank loan comes into play really over the next year and a half. So you have a copy of the preliminary term sheet, and I'm not going to go into a lot of details. I mean, I'll certainly open it up for questions. I spoke with Bankwell yesterday. They unfortunately declined to attend this evening, but I mean, they're very, very comfortable with this project. They want to be involved in this project. It's a high visibility project for the bank, the Bank of New Canaan, and they feel it's very, very important for them to participate. So the preliminary term sheet allows us to borrow up to $15 million over a maximum of a 10-year period in 2 tranches. One tranche for 5 years, and then it gets reviewed for another 5-year period. The loan would be interest only, IO only for the first 2 years, tied to the prime rate at 3.25% plus 1%. So that's basically 4.25%. The remaining term would be tied to the 5-year Treasury constant maturity index plus 2.45% and with a 4% floor. And that's the key thing because TCMI is now at 71 basis points. So if you add 2.45% to that, you only get to 3.16. So, you know, we have room if all of a sudden that interest rates kick up slightly so that, you know, there's almost 84 basis points right there of increase in interest rates, but we wouldn't be paying any more interest because we're paying the floor is at 4%. And by the way, we've been negotiating with Bankwell on this. And this is a preliminary term sheet, so we're going to have to get a contract and get it finalized. But they reduced our upfront commitment fee from 50 basis points to 25. So that saved us $31,500, and we got the floor reduced from 4.25% to 4%, which was another thing. So that's modeled in the cash flows. You'll see it's based on 4%. And so that's really the key things. And I know there's a lot of issues with, you know, what could possibly happen in a worst case scenario, but I think this loan gives us an enormous amount of flexibility. There's a long runway. If the fundraising doesn't come exactly as planned, that, you know, we can finish this project working jointly with the bank without having to really dip into any external pot of money. It's worth noting that we have an endowment now of $1.74 million. That's grown substantially over the last several years. And this year, when we finish the operational budget for the library, I mean, we're in great financial position as we have been for the last 5 or 6 years. We raised $500,000 on the nose for our annual fund, another $217,000 for fundraising events. So over 700 and some thousand in fundraising, which brought us to really, you know, filling out the budget at roughly $3 million in revenue. So, and then we also have quite a bit, close to $500,000 of unrealized gains in our portfolio. So it's all good with respect to the operational and financial side of the library itself. The cash flow model, and it really is highlighted there. We looked at it. The drawdown of the bank loan is estimated to start in fall of 2022. So we have some time, and the plan here is to expend our 6 million plus combined with the town's 10 million grant, and that's going to enable us really to handle almost the first year of the project. The drawdown on the bank loan would end on the fall of 2025. And we anticipate now that the maximum drawdown on that loan is going to be 6.5 million. And that's down from 8 million prior, a month or two ago. But that really relates to the timing and the start of the project more than anything else. So we're going to use our upfront cash instead of relying on the loan. Our estimated financing costs are going to be roughly $463,000, and that's again based on the timing of our fundraising, which is clearly a forecast. So there's not a tremendous level of precision there, but I think for the most part, we're aiming to treat this loan not as a mortgage, but basically as a line of credit. And as we fundraise, we're going to be paying down that loan month by month because there is no prepayment penalty associated with this, obviously. So any of the funds that we raise are going to be used to pay down that or any of the other contributions that we receive. So that's it, I think, in total. I'd open it up for questions if you have questions on the cash flows, the revenues.
Yep, Bob, can you hear me? It's Todd.
Yep, I can hear you.
I guess I have a question. With the maximum drawdown of 6.5 million, why would we have a line of credit for 15? That really feels, just from a risk management perspective, why wouldn't it just be 10? That would give you.
Okay. Initially, again, they have offered to drop it down to 10. We had that discussion, and erring on the conservative side, what is the issue there? Well, we are paying a commitment fee, a reduced commitment fee now. So, the savings are fairly minuscule, but at the same time, this gives us a tremendous backstop in case something happens. I don't anticipate it happening. We're not going to do our best not to let anything happen, but you can't forecast fundraising when you're in an environment where you're dependent on so many external variables, from the stock market to whatever else, the state of the town, you name it. So we opted to err on the larger sum, although we don't anticipate it. And really the only aspect of it it's going to cost us is the upfront commitment fee. And it's fairly minor.
I think the question really is when the drawdown maximum was closer to 9, 12 to 14 maybe made a little bit more sense, but if the maximum is down to 6.5, it feels like a very 10 million, just pick a number, it feels like a lot of upside potential for need. And honestly, it does put a very big exposure on the town if you were to run it up to 15 for other reasons. So I guess it's a question for this board. I appreciate 15 is prudent, so is 20, but it's also a blank check to that amount, right?
Yeah, that's true. Again, we don't anticipate using it, but we want to err on the conservative side. I had the discussion with Bankwell yesterday about potentially reducing it to 10, and certainly, this is a term sheet. It's not a final contract, and we could do that.
Maybe 12.
And if it gave comfort to the Board of Finance, we'd be happy to discuss it further. But I'd prefer a bigger number rather than a smaller number.
I understand.
You know what? I'd prefer a number that could be reduced.
Yeah.
So then you can make that decision in real time. You don't have to predict. But when you lock in, if you say to a bank, I want X, they're going to charge you a commitment fee on X, then you're locked in, you pay it, and you go to them and get that changed. But if you have unilateral right to say, you know what, I don't think I any longer need that, let's ratchet that down, that might give everybody the flexibility to kind of deal with that.
That would be true if they had a non-use, fee, but there is no non-use fee. Still. So they're paying an upfront fee, and that's it. So whether they are committed at 10 or 15 doesn't cost them.
Right. I look at this more like a line of credit rather than
Right.
a mortgage.
Line of credit.
Well, there's no non-use fee, right, Bob?
What's that?
Is there a non-use fee?
The question is there a non-use fee?
No. There's no fee.
It wasn't about saving 20,000. My question was
No.
really about risk and the exposure of that credit line would be used up to 15 when we think we're planning on 6. So I'm really asking a different question. I'm not asking, can we save 10 grand? I'm asking, are we going to run our debt up to 15, 12 or 13? And
Well, I think the reason that the question then is not so much the debt as it is the fundraising, because the way the debt will balloon is if the fundraising fails.
So actually, this is giving you extra security in conjunction.
Right.
It gives you the security to
You're in a
complete the
stress
project
situation.
with debt as
Fundraising
opposed
is
to
not going up.
completing it with equity.
It's not even about going up enough as it is the market in the event that it closes down again, and all the ramifications. That's the variable that
Well, it's like the
Hedges.
YMCA had an
Yeah.
$18 million goal and they only raised 12 for press.
there's nothing wrong with that. I mean, that's,
So it's
I mean,
good,
I'm
right?
not talking about that. There's nothing wrong with having a little extra.
No, I'm not
That's
so worried about the
normally
extra.
done.
The issue, I think, goes through that to the fundraising.
Well, that's the issue.
And because that's how the debt would balloon, is because the.
That's why I say
fundraising
double
is
it.
lagged,
make it
and
12.
then you're still having to complete the project, you're still building, the costs are escalating. You've got to pay for them somehow, and you draw on the line of credit.
I think the reality is the line of credit is used to plug the difference in fundraising to the GMAX contract, which you have. So the cost won't escalate. We'll know what you have. And within that, you have $2 million to be built in, which is 5% of your expense. So I don't see a big risk in running up. I like having the two just in the off chance. It's not going to be used to do excess engineering and make the building something that it's not. It's not going to, you've got a contract for the building for whatever the number is, 38.5. That's going to be fixed. It's not like it could be drawn down by the library to say, we really wanted a $45 million building. That's not going to happen. It's just a coverage until the fundraising comes in. So I don't think if there's no additional expense to have the extra cushion, it's structured in a way that's just going to offset the fundraising mismatch of timing. I don't see a big risk in that. And on top of that, the library, did you say that your endowments is 1.7? Did you say right now in $500,000 unrecognized at this point? I mean,
Correct.
always opportunity. You guys, if they, let's throw $1 million into the building, and take the debt down lower. I mean, that's almost another contingency we have in this. And I know there's other purposes for the endowment, but considering you're gonna have a brand new building, sometimes an endowment to get you to the brand new building, so.
And it's, well, I was just gonna say, the other thing is, you can't draw this until all the town money, all the equity is in, right? So at that point, if there is, a bump in the road on the fundraising shortfall, the last one to have finished, why, want to make sure that there's liquidity to finish the project. I don't think they can actually draw on that again. This is just preliminary. They're not gonna be able to draw into that debt facility, put it on the sweep. They can't change those documents. They're gonna be drawing against the documents that everybody signed off on. So,
But the real risk, your financing costs going from 470 to $1 million. If you have to run.
If the fundraising.
If the
it's
fundraising
not
is not-
fundraising.
That's
Right.
you're right.
It's not fundraising.
Right, but and who covers that $1 million when it goes to $1 million?
Well, is it part of the operating budget or is it part of this project? And it kind of accumulates.
So we've
Once again, what
conceived
you
of it
said.
entirely as all the debt service is in the project. None of it is in the operating.
They have to raise more money.
We'd have to continue fundraising.
if the interest went up. But I think, so this discussion can,
Just a question, you know, if the, you said the max was 6.5 and we got 15, that feels like a very generous cushion and it can be used. That's the only question.
But I think the question is beyond the debt, it goes to the fundraising.
Yeah, no, I do.
So
Of
how
course.
confident is the library that they can raise $6 million in 1 year, $5 million next? Those are big numbers,
So we raised 16 million in 16 months, so that gives us a level of confidence. We previously raised $16 million in 16 months. $1 million a month was our run rate in the 16 months prior to coming to this body in January of 2020. We had been averaging $1 million a month. So that gives us considerable confidence. There's also an awful lot of people that are waiting for all of this process to finish and for us to actually get a spade in the ground.
Sure.
And I'm very optimistic that there are a number of people out in the community who are waiting for us to get that spade in the ground and who want to talk to us.
Now, you haven't been able to fundraise for a while. You said that,
We haven't been fundraising for a while.
and so what does it take to restart the momentum?
So there's been an enormous amount of planning behind the scenes over since January. We've got various people working on getting things up and running. We've got a plan to turn the gallery and the library into a space that will be fundraising central, HQ. We've got obviously loads of people that we talked to before January 2020 that wanted us to come back and talk to them once we got to this point. Then we've got a big public phase that will come on stream sometime in the next year as well. It's very clear to us that the community is extremely excited about this project. The overwhelming majority of this community is really, really excited about this project. And I think we're going to, I'm very optimistic that we're going to be able to raise all this money. I'm hopeful that we never draw down a penny from the bank. I'm not silly enough to say we're not going to, but I'd be thrilled if we didn't have to draw anything down.
It's worth noting that after P&Z approval, we raised 150,000 of pledge money in the last several weeks. So it was an encouraging sign to see that some of the money that was on the fence was coming through the door in the last 2 weeks of July and the first week of August.
Hey, Bob, did you guys do anything with that, or did people just send the checks? Was that like passive on your end?
Passive.
It was passive. It was just commitments that of pledges that were already out there, but obviously people were waiting to see the resolution of P&Z.
So questions for you, any more financial questions for Bob or Paul? We're going to have to, make a decision in a day or so to get a date to vote on moving $10 million proposals. So I want to make sure this is the time to ask the questions, and we'll sleep on it.
Bank credit agreement, we don't have a bank rep here today.
But Bob can speak to any of that. He's
One
had
of the things we want to do both credit, the thought of the dollar, how it's treated, with seniority, second position, and then what corresponding part of it. It's very, very sophisticated. I was hoping the bank actually works that.
they don't want to talk about it until we're ready to start. They didn't want to talk about that.
I have a question
Competitive
for Bob
situation.
about the first covenant. The borrower shall at all times the minimum equity proceeds invested in the project shown on the cost of date. Do you think is that a covenant that is going to be easily achieved, or is that one that's going to be we're going to get close to that?
Okay, I can't really hear the question. Lisa, could you restate the question? I think it has to do with covenants in the Bankwell loan.
Yeah, it's the first covenant.
Yeah, it's the first covenant.
Can you talk about the first covenant and whether or not there's going to be any challenge for us to achieve that?
Yeah, so we don't anticipate any challenge. So this is the interesting thing. I mean, if you're referring to the fact that the bank has a lien on the property, right? I've had lengthy discussions with Bankwell in the case of the worst case scenario, what would happen. And obviously, they have to look at everything on a case by case scenario. And whether, our inability to service the loan is permanent or temporary. But under almost all circumstances, there's enormous flexibility built into this because first of all, the bank doesn't want an impaired loan on their balance sheet. Any kind of foreclosure would be absolutely the last step. And so essentially, they've done this with others during the pandemic here recently and otherwise, but they would do a workout under almost all circumstances where, they had the flexibility to change the payment terms, the amortization, the interest rates. And so they can adjust these levers in a workout to make sure that, they can accommodate the library. And they gave me an example where they really legally can't commit to it, but they said, we had a client here who temporarily went without servicing the loan or paying their debt payments or interest rate payments. So what they did is a 90-day deferment. Then they did another 90-day deferment and another 90-day deferment. So they basically back end loaded the interest on the loan. And so under any circumstance where they anticipate trouble, and we would reach out to them if we ever got in that case, they were pretty confident that they could come. This loan would have the flexibility; they could come back to us with an adjustment of terms. So, I hope that answers your questions. But essentially, the legal remedies are not a path that anyone wants to go down in this case.
Thank you.
I think they would have to restructure the loan because after a while, the regulators are going to force them to do something with it. You can't just keep giving 90-day extensions. You can't do it a few times, but then you have to restructure the loan. And when that happens, you're right, Bob, you're going to have all of these, all your terms and conditions are subject to change. Does the bank have any idea in their head that ultimately they can come to the town for repayment of the loan?
Well, I think the bank believes that the library and the town are partners in this project, right? As we are. The $10 million grant essentially says that, and that's one of the conditions of them offering the loan. But, they've seen our ability to fundraise, and there's a long runway there. So I think they're fairly confident that there's not a scenario where they can't work things out with us. But, in an Armageddon scenario where they would have to go down the path of foreclosure, I think they would assume, as I would assume, that we would have a conversation with the town first. As a practical matter, they don't want to own a library.
So that's the question, the dollars coming back, how they'd be treated, where they would flow. So let's say the library is paid, the default paid, it comes back and
Is there a question there? I couldn't hear it.
not clear where the flow of funds is, where the money goes. If a dollar is being paid back, does it go to the bank first because they have a senior lien? Does it go to the town? That's sort of the mechanics of the document I want to work through with the bank. I think they would actually know this pretty well. It's outlined to some degree in the document, but I couldn't figure out certain things like that. So just take that example. You're paying back. Who gets it? Paying back some money. Default payment. Operating budget. Bank.
What's the next step? Are you going to meet with the bank? Or
I'm wondering.
I wonder, could we have a conversation if it's a confidentiality thing? Could we have
is that something can be organized?
or
Bob, can you
Is that
answer
a-
that?
I don't want to.
The next step with the bank loan, is that was the question?
No,
They
it's
could meet.
about Neil meeting with the bank to understand the question about, in the extremist example of default, which we all agree is highly unlikely, but if it happened, what does repayment look like if I think you're saying, if the town stepped in to help pay off the debt and the library continues fundraising, as the dollars come in through fundraising, who gets paid back? I think we'd have to agree that with you, wouldn't we, rather than the bank?
Yeah, first of all, the commercial loan officer who's working on this loan with us has agreed that, he'll address any one-off questions with members of the Board of Finance. So what I can do is facilitate a call between that gentleman and Neil, and, you can ask that specific question.
That would be great.
He's got to toe the legal line, I'm sure, but, and express, what the bank's rights are in a worst case scenario. But I mean, he could probably clarify that point a lot better than I could.
I think we have a couple P and Z and MOU questions. I just want to kind of tie out all the financials. Any more financial related questions? I think we exhausted that. I do have one. On Schedule A, I think it's probably for you, Paul. It says that the building permit, there's no number for a building permit, and it says parenthetically by owners. So I guess as your partner, I'm asked as partners. What is that? What is that?
So as a nonprofit, there was discussion, I know with legal counsel, I'm not sure there was, my understanding was that there was conversation between the town and the library legal counsel, Ted O'Hanlon at the time, and that there would be a negotiated amount because most private for-profit entities in this, it would be a larger number, and the hope was that the library could negotiate a lower building permit fee. And so it was an unknown at the time, and
So it would be either a shared cost or a lower.
it would be a lowered amount.
We know.
We don't have the details for that yet,
Can I ask a
but
question?
it's not by the CM.
When the town does a strictly town building, like Saks or town hall,
We
do
don't pay.
we pay building permit?
Yes, that should be good.
Yeah.
Schools would be.
Yeah, so
We're exempt, even though we're sort of, it's a rule for them.
Yeah.
Build.
now we're doing setting costs on
Well, I think it's right pocket, left pocket too.
it. Yeah, so,
So we're
Yeah.
zero. Okay, I'm just asking because it was parenthetically, I didn't know what by owners meant. But I assume that-
And the P and Z is a condition that exempt you from approved housing.
Okay. Okay, any other questions of financials? So maybe back to the MOU. Questions on the MOU for this group?
We walk through each section, or what do you want to do?
I think everyone's had a long time to look at it. I assume that people came with questions, let's ask them.
Yeah, so the way we did this is we got feedback from members of the Board of Finance, and we bundled them up and sent them to the town attorney, who put them into a draft that we're currently looking at. I understand this draft has been submitted to the library's attorneys for review. We're still waiting for a final draft, which will be available to us before
We have to, that's kind of the.
So you can see the changes
I'm
that.
sorry, Chris, when will that be ready? We have a sense in terms of we'll have the red line back.
Well, they gave us comments this afternoon.
Okay.
They're fine. So
Yeah.
So we'll have a clean copy tomorrow. Tomorrow. Okay, okay. That's guiding, that's.
Yeah, because we need
timing.
to read it.
Yep.
So you can look through this and see what the major changes were. There were a few with respect to the disbursement, as written in the original MOU. The disbursement was always pari passu. So $1 from the library was $1 from the town. That was based on some assumptions that everything would be ready before anything started. But things move along different tracks at different speeds. The library, as they have pointed out, have spent $3 to $4 million on soft costs. And so what we did is we amended this drawdown to have a catch. And the catch-up brings both sides to whatever number the soft cost is, and the library has to give us a schedule of all those expenses, and then we would advance an amount equal to that schedule as our first disbursement. And, we're talking about 3.7, 4.2 million, something along those lines. So then that block of money would then be used to pay for the next block of expenses, and when that money was exhausted, then every subsequent dollar is a dollar there than a dollar. That's how it should.
Where does it say that specifically?
203.
But, wow,
So 203A is the catch-up.
yeah,
So they spend $10 before the grant's available,
yeah, I
and they put in for $10, then the library's at 10, the town's at 10.
It's
And
not-
then B
it's
and
not a
C,
reimbursement.
yeah,
It is not a
well,
reimbursement.
well, right, the town puts in 10 for the next $10 of project costs.
Right.
Then the library's at 10, the town's at 10, and then after that, section B and C pick up with dollar. Way up.
And the cash flows reflect that. I mean, the cash flow, yeah, reflected that.
Trying to connect those dots.
Yeah.
Yes, it does,
Not-
it does,
not
it does.
exactly, They probably have to be refined.
Yeah,
but
but-
that's-
It will, and
Based on.
as the
because
fundraising
Cash
comes.
flow is done with June numbers that, yeah.
But notably, what happens is all of the grant and the town one has to go in for the bank.
Yeah, that's so.
And then, so when you look at the spreadsheet, there's an anticipated draw of 6 and change under the $15 million line, right? And that goes from 22 to 25. So there's a little bit of disconnect there on the time. And that was that question, it's 24 months, this is 3, right? We're trying to figure it out again. The words in the term sheet now suggest that the consequence of going beyond the 24 is that it's unavailable, it's more expensive. I pay for that commitment. Spend more, so you can still get, you can still borrow. So that's the way I read it.
As a practical matter, if the numbers flow out like model, so the town would make a grant equal to the catch-up amount. So let's say it's a $4 million. Library would then spend the next $4 million that we just gave them for the next $4 million of expenses. They still have $6 million of cash. So we have $6 million of unused commitment, and so those two funds pay down on equal amount until ours is zero, and then it's all their money or then the bank. Okay.
maybe we could add a sentence there. This is very legal language. It's not clear. It's a good thought.
If you want to send a suggestion. Who's got who was this? Chris?
I thought you wrote this.
Yeah, I wrote A. Doug and I wrote A.
Judy clearly doesn't like it.
Well, I don't think the common person really understands it. Maybe just a
Well-
comment that is, your comment.
What you
and
just
it's
said.
not a reimbursement. And explain that it's dollar for dollar or 10 for 10 or however you want to say it. Or town money before bank money. None of that's really stated.
Well, I think the idea is, so there's project costs that are expended prior to the town's grant being made available.
Just let's put that in. That's perfect.
But it says there's going to be a detailed report of all project costs the library has expended up to the requisition certificate date, which kind of to me is works. Right? And so then what they're saying is that describes the ceiling above which they can't request. So they can come, so the next X dollars of project costs would now be funded through the grant. Right, and so what happens is, the trades do their work, they're signed off on, CMN signs off on, it's all good. and they're gonna come for payment, they come to us, and then we're gonna go, the next X dollars are coming from the grant. Once those two numbers are there, library's in for X, town's in for X. Everything else now goes to 203B, which is then, now we're dollar for dollar. The project has 2X in it. So then B takes over, and then it's sort of dollar for dollar. So if there's $10, 5's coming from libraries, 5's coming from the town grant.
So B explains that. I mean,
Well, the
B
B
is a
is just
better
the catch up. So
clarification, yeah.
A is just a catch up.
Yeah, I mean, nothing has changed in this paragraph except the addition of A.
Right, which is just
Was the
making it
catch-up.
clear. Right.
All right.
If we left it, then the library would have to,
Right. How do you start at this? Right. How do you start at the same place when they've been spending money now for X number of months, and we're just going to come on the scene, right? Once things get rolling, and so that's what A is designed to do. Way out.
and if you don't do this, then a cash flow won't work.
No, that's obvious.
Yeah, so,
Okay,
All right.
We're good.
and the only other comments have to do with levels of approval for various changes, the document. The solution was proposed by council that we use the term town bodies to represent selectmen's office, board of finance, and town council. And it would stand to reason that all those entities would want to have a say in those items where that's been inserted. And there's a few places that really.
one question. I think we need to be prepared to resolve any building preservation strategy plans and costs. I guess the question is, how does the MOU create, I'll call it management or governance protection for any preservation costs?
It does not, the idea is that that would be a separate MOU.
Okay.
A separate resolution.
It's okay.
Separate debate.
It's okay. This document is not solve world hunger, but there's got to be a process by which we do what I just said for the preservation cost strategy.
Well, the one thing this does say is that none of the monies of the 10 million can be used for that second project.
No, I understand that. I think we have to think of these as two pieces. They're
Yeah.
linked, of course, like, well, we'll get that right. This could happen. There could be money that needs to be spent. There needs to be P&Z involvement, town bodies, everybody's gonna have to be involved. There's gonna have to be some financing potentially. We don't know what that is, but there may be. So this document doesn't address it, and that's not a criticism. I think that's just, but we will need to have some kind of mechanism for this town body to approve
So
some
I
other
think-
financial.
Yeah, so, I mean, from our point of view, we haven't discussed or contemplated any more than that we need to design first a building that will meet all the requirements of the P&Z, this extra building. Only once it's designed can we have cost estimators give us a sense of what that will cost. We have to get a building permit, we can figure out what it's going to cost. It's not going to get built until after this entire project is finished. So it seems like we could, and I'm hearing, there seems to be a sense that people in town government would like to contribute to that project, which is terrific. I think we would talk about that once we know what it looks like, what the scope of the project is, what the scale, what the costs would be. And I'm assuming that an enormous number of people are going to come forward and put their hand up and say they really want to help pay for it from the community. So, you know, we need to know a lot of things before we're ready to discuss who and how we're paying for it, I think. But I think there are too many unknowns.
I know, you're right, of course, but we gotta have a who and how. It's not in this document.
It's not in
And it's, I guess that's okay. It'll have to be, to your point, you don't have enough facts.
I don't think there's enough, we don't have enough
Right.
facts at all at this point.
Well, we could add an addendum, could we not? This is all
Well, no, I
resolved.
think
This
it'd
is
be
nice and
completely
clean.
Separate, completely separate thing, because you never know. There may be people in this town who are more than delighted to put private money behind that. And we're not asked for a benefit, in which case, hallelujah. But on the other side, there may be a big shortfall. We don't know.
Especially if it meets their definition of preservation. You know, it all varies on who's.
We don't know any, we can't plan for this because we just don't know. We don't know the scope of it, we don't know the expense, we don't know if it's gonna be what the PNC is gonna say about it.
Other MOU questions?
I do.
Oh, yeah.
So,
go ahead, Maria.
So in J of the first section, it talks about 39.5 million. But then in section 2.01, it says 38 million. And I guess, and we're talking about on the cash flow, it said 38.5. So I'm just kind of curious as to what number we're going with.
So what we sent back to your council today had the numbers all aligned.
If this is the red line.
It's the most
The
current.
last version, we have.
It's the most current one.
Yeah, because we wrote this with some other numbers which are no longer.
Right.
Those are in the past.
And just in terms of the timing of the bank loan, that will be in place at the time the MLU goes live. It's a condition.
I-
So
Understand.
Bob, can you, I think we can sign our commitment fee with the bank after the town vote on the 10 million. Is that correct?
Correct. And, we need to put a deposit, a good faith deposit to get the process going with an appraisal and everything else. That good faith deposit is $25,000. So, we're anticipating, making that check to writing that check to the bank here in the next several weeks. And then, they have to start doing all their due diligence. And that would probably take in the neighborhood of about 2 months.
To complete the diligence and complete all of the loan documentation.
Correct. And the legal work. So, we have an attorney representing us, the bank's attorney, and they'll go back and forth and negotiate the actual loan document.
But you can have a signed binding loan commitment. Short.
Correct. No, we'll have that signed term sheet and commitment, in the next several weeks, hopefully.
End of next week, if everything goes to the calendar that we've
Yeah.
got set.
Well, so, but that's the question is, so, because it actually, the words on the page say it's not a commitment. And I'm just trying, because the RMLU contemplates that the library will have arranged for, right? It will be in place. So there's a little bit of a chicken and egg thing there that presumably can be overcome, but I'm just trying to understand. It's good catch.
There's no question, there's a little bit of timing issue here. And, we couldn't proceed with the bank until we got P&Z approval. So we didn't want to go through this multiple times. But I mean, I think everything has been green lighted now that we can move ahead relatively quickly.
2 months sounds like a long time.
It does
Get a
sound-
pretty
does.
simple
It feels
document
that way.
together.
Yeah,
We've
it
gone through
feels.
this all the time. I think they could speed it up.
It's not like we're
Yeah,
just.
they have an engineer and I mean, there's a whole process they go through, and I guess it just depends on their backlog.
Yeah, I mean, I would have thought that, again, words on the page matter, but we could have lived with a written loan commitment where the bank goes hard, it's subject to some conditions, it's not a full-blown loan
Yes.
agreement, you can't borrow under it, but they have a commitment, they're incurring bank capital charges, and you pay for that privilege, which all seems to be in one element or another present here. It's pretty clear in all bold, all caps, it says it is not a commitment. I would have thought in order for our grant to go live, we would want that piece there.
So when you say go live,
Our grant.
so do we mean the appropriation or the actual disbursement? Because I think the
We
disbursement,
can yes.
the disbursement won't happen until these will dovetail.
September.
Right.
So
So
your
we
real
could
point, your real
approve-
point is the bank should be prepared to make a commitment when we approve the
By September.
appropriation.
Right, so our approval should be of a document that contemplates that there is a bank commitment, a hard bank commitment in place. And then
By the
Kevin
time
can
of the
sign and do
disbursement.
everything he needs to do because he's authorized to do it under the terms of what's.
Bob, is that correct what I've just said? That essentially, you're there, yeah. So Bob, if the town votes to appropriate 10 million next week, we give a check to,
Appropriation in September. The MOU will maybe approve, but that's just an indication of what our agreement is. We intend to appropriate in September.
No.
that is not what we've been talking about.
We're meeting in the next.
Yeah,
It is about resolution.
we would do a bond resolution as soon as, we don't have a final MOU, we need to add, there's a couple other questions, but we would move it in a week,
And we don't have time to publish.
10 days, whatever. We don't have to wait till September. We can move it, we can do it according with all of our guidelines and timing. when we have a final MOU, that's the gating item right now. We all have to read that. Then we can start the clock on moving something. We don't have to wait. So now they don't have funds going to them until the first tranche. Then there is a date delay in there. That's
So which is what I was trying to get at here. If these things are, so if the bank commitment is all lined up, all that is signed, sealed and delivered before the first disbursement, then we should be all
Yeah.
aligned.
Yeah, because what we're going to be approving is an MOU for Kevin and for our appropriation. The MOU will have wording that says it's a condition for us to let go of $1.
That we have the,
That the bank be,
that's it.
part.
right.
But are we willing to accept hard as a loan agreement or a
Unconditional.
commitment letter?
Well, again, words on the page matter, but a properly drafted loan commitment would be sufficient to me. I kind of take Amy's point
I
that,
agree with you. This is not a loan.
No.
This is term sheet.
Correct.
It says all over it, it's not a commitment.
which is,
The bank can't produce a commitment letter, and that's what you want, commitment. And I think we'd be willing to operate.
And I would add that the term sheet set to expire August 6th too.
And it also says you have to complete the billing in 24 months. So you've got to get those items fixed.
So just in terms of review the bidding here, Neil, you were going to talk with the bank. We need this bank commitment letter, separate point regarding those two things. We do need the final MOU. So we just have the.
So that's with
final
you.
Draft.
Yes. It's with your lawyer.
Where's the final draft? Oh, we're looking at you. I don't have. Final MOU.
final MOU, something came back to our
We
lawyer.
got comments 3 o'clock afternoon.
So we have it. So that's,
Yeah.
so we'll go, we need to go through that. They'll either bless it and we're good to go, and then we can have it. Okay.
You don't have a meeting till next week.
So to be clear, the comments were about 5 typos.
Yeah, 5 typos and 2 commas, but let's just have a final. We don't want to move this without a final. And then the last thing would just be our getting the calendar rolling on a bond resolution. Right, those are the to-dos.
Do we have to notice the MOU in paper by law? We do not, are we sure of that? I just haven't had an MOU of this extent. Okay, all right.
Just appropriations.
Other last questions?
Yeah, I have a,
Go ahead, Drew.
I do. Under 107, the parking, it's number A. I'm still uncomfortable with having this concept of a parking deck included in the center school lot. We really haven't had discussion of that, even in the And I don't know why, at this point in time, we would take on an issue and enter it into an MOU that, in my mind, could certainly prompt a referendum. I mean, or add to the fuel of fire of a referendum. And in fact, the traffic engineer said the center school's lot was not a good place for a tiered lot because of the grade change. And that's up to $1 million of taxpayer money. I talked to Kevin about this. I can't get my arms around
Purpose of
this.
that is
yet.
20, 30, 50 years from now.
It doesn't matter.
It's
It's a commitment.
it's a public parking lot. We're committing 76 spaces.
We
However we decide to provide them, just like with the lumberyard agreement, that one, right? We are allowed to build a deck there to provide the spaces that we're promising. So it's just to make clear to the library, should we decide in the future, 50 years from now, to provide those spaces in a different way, we have the right to. That's all it does.
You're just
Preserving
town
the
is
rights of the
preserving your
town.
rights to allocate those spaces in whatever way you
We
choose.
have no intention.
Yeah.
in the next-
Between allocating spaces and adding.
I'm just saying, the lawyers agree.
But it's nothing to do with us, is my point.
Made clear to the library, that's between us and the library.
But would that right exist, even if you didn't say so?
I'm not gonna debate them. The lawyers recommended we do that because we did it in the lumberyard situation, right? You make it clear, we have the right, we're not providing the spaces that are in there currently forever. We have the right to recomplete.
So you're saying that is in existing town documents and it's a standard clause that we put in all of our parking arrangements.
That's the precedent.
There is a precedent.
Lumberyard.
No, but
And here it is 20 years later, we're now building a deck at the lumberyard. So-
yeah, but let me go back 25 years on the lumberyard, because I was drawn into that. I was the youngest person asked to participate. we had a ton of discussion on this. And we left it in only because of the size, scale, and scope of that lot. But even at the lawyer's suggestion and recommendations, it was never a good idea. It was just because it was so immense. This is not immense. You've got churches there, you've got neighbors, it's controlled, it's a limited amount of space.
I have a question. In this clause, okay, to guarantee the town's flexibility, what if you just ended it without limitation?
That's what I
period?
said, yeah. And let it
It
go.
doesn't say you can't put a parking deck
It's another fight, another day.
without limitation.
I think this is part of the parking terms, the board of selectmen agreed with, right? This is not a financial term. And we tell the public, we have no intention of decking that lot in the next 10, 20 years.
Oh, I'm not arguing
But
with you
50
about
years from now, it may be different.
I'm just saying without limitation kind of gives you a lot of flexibility.
I don't think it's a financial term for the board. of finance.
Oh, I think it's all within the same context, though. Are we having a public hearing before our next meeting so people can speak to any of the issues that have been discussed tonight or anything else? I mean, have we thought about that? Because that at least would provide an opportunity.
Town council has to.
Well, we both have had them in the past.
We have to send a bond resolution to them.
Well, they would have one too, for sure.
We won't have one for a bond resolution.
No, but we could. We could.
We're not gonna have one. We don't need
Well, I'm
one.
saying.
We're gonna send a bond resolution to town council and then there'll be a public hearing. Right? That's the way it works. Okay. Other questions? Any other questions on any of those other three items? P and Z, MOU, going once, twice, GMP. Great job. Bob, thank you
You're welcome.
for hanging in there. I hope you could hear okay. I don't know that you could, but
No, I got the gist of pretty much everything.
okay. It's 30 million is the budget. You heard that, right? And so we have to get those line items wrapped up, and you'll wait to hear from me. Once that's all done, we'll try to schedule another special meeting solely for the purpose of voting on the $10 million resolution. Tucker, you'll help us with the timing. We've got to notice it and all the rest of it. We're not there yet, but it could be in the next 10 days or so, and then it goes to the town council.
Yes, and could you also let everybody know, there were already hearing issues this evening. This will be posted, the clean recording will be posted tomorrow morning on the town website. Anybody can go back and listen to this meeting again in the morning. There were some interactions, some interferences going on.
Are you asking me to repeat what you just said?
I don't know if anybody can hear you, but
That's
maybe
what-
you should.
You don't have a mic, so I think the point being, anyone who has issues, there'll be a live recording available on the website tomorrow morning after
YouTube, yellow YouTube circle.
yellow YouTube circle tomorrow morning, and you can listen to this with better audio. Okay, anything else? Going once? Okay, great meeting, everybody. Thank you so much. Motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Second? Done? All in favor?
Who made?
I picked Chris and Neil. Opposed, none? Thank you. Thanks, everybody.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks, Bob.